the chosen ones. When God decides it is time, no counsel, no bribe, and no ritual can postpone the judgment. Have you ever noticed how the wicked generally appear the most confident just before they fall? It is nearly charming. It's like seeing someone go into a trial, hoping their sunglasses and attitude would wow the judge. Except the judge is God, and he does not hold mistrials. But here is the scary reality. When they attempted to take your life, they signed the warrant for their own. You didn't just survive. You initiated a spiritual investigation, and the case is airtight. According to statistics, most offenders are more concerned with public exposure than with imprisonment. But when God intervenes, he doesn't just reveal. He removes the illusion of authority. He does not throw them in jail. He revises the sentence of their existence. And the irony, they assumed you were weak because you remained mute. However, quiet was not your weakness. It was a wonderful plan. While they were scheming your demise, heaven was preparing their judgment. So brace up, because this isn't about vengeance. This is about the reckoning. And believe me, God does not need bars to keep people in cages. Let's chat about it. Number 1, divine restriction does not imply divine absence. God did not strike them down the minute they moved against you, but it does not mean he was sleeping. It doesn't imply he didn't see. And that does not imply they got away with it. What most people misinterpret for God's silence is in fact divine plan in action. There is a significant difference between being ignored and being researched. God does not haste like we do. He does not panic. He is watching. He waits. And when he moves, he doesn't just correct the issue. He reveals the underlying system. This is what makes divine justice so terrible. See, if God had punished them right when they assaulted you, they would have spun it. They would have played. The victim lied through their teeth, turning the situation into a pity party. But God waits until the mask slips off by itself, and people disclose themselves without even realizing it. That way, when the collapse occurs, it will be public, irrefutable, and irreversible. This is more than simply one individual doing you wrong. This is about the deeper rot, the network of people, ideas, and motivations that allowed them to believe they could ruin you while winning. God isn't only punishing individuals. He is pulling up the roots. That is why it takes time. Not because he is gentle, but because he is meticulous. He's making sure that his movements aren't a warning. This is the end of the line. When people believe God is not present, they become quite vocal. That's when they flex, lie, and insult you, assuming your quiet indicates weakness. But they overlooked something critical. The same God who holds back may also turn everything off in an instant. And when he does, there are no second chances, do-overs, or negotiations. Only outcomes. Swift, definitive, permanent. The fact is that God's delay was for your safety, and they are undoing. He let them dig their own hole, saying a little too much and going too far. And now, when the judgment arrives, there is no doubt about who is right and who is wrong. It's obvious, and they understand. This is why they're nervous. That's why they're spiraling. They're now recognizing what you always understood. God was not absent. He was aiming. Number 2, their hands were not bound. They were exposed. They did not halt because they had a change of heart. They did not suddenly have a conscience. The reality is, they encountered something they couldn't explain, manipulate, or outwit. Their hands were bound by terror. They were forcibly exposed. Something was preventing them from proceeding, and that something was God. He didn't appear in a big, dramatic scene. He did not have to. His very presence was enough to stymie every move, close every door, and confound every weapon they expected to employ against you. You were the target. They intended to damage your name, reputation, and maybe your life. And at first, it appeared like they were winning. They had confidence. They had momentum. But then, one by one, everything began to fall apart for them. Quietly, uncomfortably, and without explanation, what they believed would be simple quickly became complicated. They couldn't understand why the plans that worked for others didn't work for you. That misunderstanding was not at random. That was divine intervention. God did not just halt their hand. He showed their limitations. Because when people believe they are untouchable, God has a way of telling them they are not. He does not always take their lives. Sometimes he just paralyzes their strength. And this is exactly what occurred. Their failure to finish what they started was not due to fear. They hit a stationary wall. Here is the truth. They don't want to acknowledge they didn't back off out of guilt. They were shut out of heaven's decree. They were spiritually overruled. They are fully aware of this. They knew they touched the incorrect one. Not because you resisted, but because something battled for you. And that scares them. They intended to be the cause of your breakup. But now you are the cause. Their illusion of authority is crumbling. You survived, not by chance, but by divine power. And the more they remain in quiet, the clearer it becomes that they were not halted by circumstance. They were halted by a force they couldn't identify, touch, or outrun. God did not allow them to go through with it, not to defend them, but to demonstrate how weak they were the entire time. Number 3, you were the bait, not the victim. You were not the victim. They assumed you were. You were the bait, and they stepped right into the setup. See, they believed they were playing a game of control. They believed they had the upper hand. But the reality is, when they came for you, they walked right into a trap they didn't see. God, not you, designed this trap. As a result, everything they tried backfired. That is why the harm they attempted to do in your life is now haunting theirs. They weren't just revealed. They were enticed into revealing themselves. That's the part that consumes them. You didn't need to fight nasty. You did not have to yell, scheme, or exact retribution. All you did was remain in place. And that is what made the entire situation so dangerous for them. Because while they were busy believing you were weak and defenseless, God was using your very presence to drive them away. They believed you were cornered, yet you were protected. And while they were putting on a show, lying, manipulating, and attempting to eliminate you, every action they made became proof. Everything they spoke was recorded. Every ploy they utilized is now part of their own demise. Because this is the truth. God doesn't only protect individuals. He documents injustice before passing judgment. You were never intended to combat them. You were supposed to expose them. This is why you didn't lose your mind. That's why, even when things were dark and difficult, you always remained anchored. That was God keeping you exactly where he needed you. Not because he wanted you to suffer, but because your perseverance revealed their true motives. They felt they were being silenced by you, but really they were signing their own spiritual condemnation. And now, when everything goes wrong for them, they won't be able to blame you. They will understand exactly why it is occurring. Because they played with someone who was not randomly picked. You were a component in a divine scheme. They did not leave vanquished by you. The setup proved to be their downfall. They stepped into a setting designed for perfect timing, heavenly protection, and your silent obedience. They came to annihilate you. However, they ended up becoming the proof God required to demolish their society. Number 4, God did not save you silently. He humiliated them strategically. They expected God's salvation to be a quiet background miracle, subtle, forgettable, and buried. But he did not save you. He quietly let the entire situation to play out in public, since it wasn't just about your survival. It was about their exposure. It was more than simply protection. It was about placement. He put you in the limelight, not to demonstrate your power, but to make their depravity difficult to ignore. They intended to ruin you and go away unscathed. They intended to quiet you, damage you, and then continue as if nothing had occurred. Instead, your existence became their loudest accusation. God did not just pull you out. He left you standing just where they tried to bury you. They are completely whole, living, and surrounded by evidence that they cannot erase. And this is what's driving them mad. Your peace speaks louder than their lives. Your silence is heaviest. It produces noise. Because no matter how quiet you are, your consistency says volumes. Every day you wake up unconcerned, they slide more. Every blessing that you receive reveals how cursed their intentions were. You aren't flexing. You aren't even fighting back. but your life continues to testify. See, when God wishes to disgrace the wicked, he does not always employ lightning. He sometimes uses peace. He allows them to see the person they attempted to shatter live freely while they collapse within. That is the shame. No scene, no scandal, just the truth. Just you, strolling through life with an unfakeable serenity, and a future that will not stop. And this is the worst thing for them. You don't need to prove anything. Your existence is proof. They're capable of lying. They can twist it, but every time someone sees you succeeding, it contradicts all they have said and done. You are the receipt. You're the paradox. You are the outcome they said was impossible. And it is what reveals them more than any words could. God did not just preserve you. He positioned you like a mirror that they can't take their eyes away from. And the more relaxed you are, the louder their guilt gets. That's not an accident. That is divine strategy. Number 5, their conscience is now the cage before any courtroom sees them or charges are filed. They are already imprisoned, not by law, but by their own conscience. The reality is, guilt does not wait for handcuffs. It begins when the untruth becomes too big to carry. You don't need a court to punish someone who is already tortured by their own thinking. That is the actual penalty, the sort that does not have headlines or sirens. They cannot escape the never-ending stillness. They may appear okay on the outside, smiling, posting, and acting as if nothing has occurred. But that is simply noise. It's a disguise because when they're alone, they can't conceal the reality they've hidden. And now that the truth is resurfacing, what they did to you is replaying in their minds like a broken record. That is not paranoia. The echo of repercussions is starting to speak. They may lie to others, but they cannot lie to themselves indefinitely. They ignored that small voice while plotting, while they manipulated, while they attempted to hide their traces. It's louder now, and they can't sleep. That is why they are restless. That is why people are unable to achieve calm, even in comfort. Because their conscience is not just whispering. It screams. Here's the most brutal portion. There's no off switch, alcohol, diversion, or romance that can drown it out. Their feigned strength does not mute the internal dialogue. It just postpones the collapse because remorse eats from the inside out. Slowly, silently, and continuously, they felt incarceration was their worst dread. But this is worse since a person may survive in prison. However, you're caught inside a mind that will not allow you to forget, run, or relax. That is a distinct type of sentence. One is being held without parole. You didn't need to raise a finger. You did not have to exact retribution. Life, truth, and time are carrying out the task. Their own conscience has turned against them. Not because you cursed them, but because they cursed themselves for touching something that was protected. The penalty has already begun, long before they are called out in court. It began when they assumed they had gotten away with it and discovered too late. They did not. 6th, the punishment is not only legal, but cosmic. This is not simply about legal ramifications. It's far bigger than that. There is a degree of judgment that no court or lawyer can fight against. When God comes in, he does more than simply punish them physically. He terminates their spiritual mission, their destiny, their influence, and their overall impact. This is what makes divine justice so terrible. It is not about penalties or time served. It is about complete disqualification. Some people believe that avoiding the law means avoiding judgment. What they don't comprehend is that legal protection does not include spiritual implications. You may employ a team to improve your reputation. You can purchase quiet, distort facts, and twist narratives. However, when God rules against you, nothing works. Opportunities cease flowing. Connections dry up. Doors that have been thrust open suddenly refuse to move. And no matter how much they push, hustle, or fake it, nothing happens. Here's what happens when God closes the door. Not only should you consider your strategies, but also your purpose. It is not only punishment, it's a cancellation. Not only is their present life impacted, However, what they were expected to leave behind, their legacy, influence, and spiritual impact, is revoked. That is how deep it goes. That was something they never expected, because to them, it was simply a moment, an attack, or another target. But God saw it as rebellion against divine rule. It was touching something divine. You weren't simply a human. You were an assignment. And when they acted against you, they did not just transgress. They breached a spiritual pact. That is why the punishment appears invisible yet difficult to avoid. That's why, no matter how hard they strive to heal, something always feels blocked, cursed. This isn't a coincidence. It's a consequence. They were deprived of more than just their titles. They have lost access. When God pulls his breath away from someone's task, it makes no difference how charismatic or connected they are. Their impact dies quietly. So, while they appear to be free-spirited, they are spiritually impoverished. They are barred from fulfilling God's will. No jail could match that punishment, because once God closes the door, no one can reopen it, and no ego can withstand it. Number 7, they couldn't murder you since you were part of a prophecy. They couldn't get you out, not because they didn't try, but because they lacked the authority. You are more than simply a lucky person. You've been written into something far greater. A prophecy that implies your existence is not coincidental. Your journey was not created by luck. It was purposefully planned, supported by heaven, and sealed with a word that cannot be void. That's why nothing they threw at you could break you. You stood firm no matter how difficult the circumstances were. You were carried by something other than your own power. It was an assignment for your life. You're a part of something that was established long before they targeted you. You are not just protected. You're in position. You are vital for the blossoming of something holy. That implies no weapon constructed against you can succeed. Not because the weapon isn't real, but because you're too valuable to succumb to it. They misjudged your carrying capacity. They spotted a person. God witnessed a prophecy. That is the difference. They believed they could ruin you. Stop it. Silence yourself. But they were up against something immortal. There is no human power, no evil force, no manipulation, no defamation has the authority to cancel what God has ordered. You were not maintained only to survive. You were saved for a purpose. There are those that require what is inside of you. Certain events will not occur unless you talk. There are atmospheres that will not change until you arrive. You were sent to this earth to do something that no one else can. That explains why the attacks have been so fierce. This is why your life has seemed like a battlefield. Because when you carry destiny, you will face opposition. But here's the truth they'd rather not confront. They aren't battling you. They are resisting the prophecy that is tied to you. And that prophecy is unbreakable. It does not yield to threats. It does not respond to falsehoods. It holds steadfast because it was said by a voice that reigns over all thrones and rulers. So they couldn't murder you, not because they failed, but because heaven refused. When heaven says no, no earthly force can defy it. You're still here because your task is still active. And until it is completed, you are untouchable. Number 8, their judgment began when they touched you. Something changed the instant they touched you. Not simply in the natural, but also in the spiritual judgment. I didn't wait for the final act. It began the second. They made you their target. That is how important it is to impact a life marked by God. The attack on you was more than just an offensive. It was a violation. And in the spiritual sphere, infractions have automatic repercussions. They assumed they had time. They believed they could scheme, deceive, and walk away unharmed. But they didn't comprehend that heaven replies in real time. God does not require a formal complaint to intervene. He does not need your consent to protect you. He is watching. He measures the heart. When the goals are to corrupt, to dock, to be entrenched in pride and devastation, he acts. Not always with lightning and thunder. Sometimes he strikes silently, destroying their intentions. Sometimes he wastes their greatest opportunity. Sometimes he begins eliminating individuals from their life. Confusion penetrates their camp. their confidence begins to shake. Their tranquility evaporates up. Their favor fades, and they're left wondering why everything is now so unsteady. That's not a coincidence. That's a consequence. Even when the rest of the world is still catching up, the spiritual realm responds to injustice. You didn't have to fight back for things to begin going apart for them. Your presence, assignment, and alignment with God were enough to sound the alert. Because when someone touches something protected, heaven does not hesitate. It steps in to protect, rectify, and rebalance what has been thrown off track. You didn't have to say anything. You simply had to suffer. And while you endured, God replied, not loudly but precisely. Every step they made was recorded. When their falsehoods got too brazen, too reckless, or too disrespectful to the true judgment set in. God does not tolerate arrogance disguised as authority, and he will not allow anybody to profit from the pain of someone he has called. So, while they were laughing, taunting, and feeling invincible, their demise was well underway. Quiet, accurate, and unstoppable. Because touching what belongs to God with dirty hands results in divine correction as well as karma. And that cannot be postponed, denied, or avoided. Number 9, their tardiness was their undoing. They believed that by postponing accountability, they could get away with it. That if enough time passed, people would forget and the truth would be buried. But they didn't realize that time isn't always a gift. Sometimes time is a trap. In their instance, the delay proved to be the final nail in the coffin. Every day spent running, lying, pretending, or hiding did not cleanse them. It collected evidence. Time was not spent clearing up the mess. It was recording, storing, and preserving it while they were attempting to avoid penalties. They were really going closer to judgment since God was not ignoring them. He was documenting. He was documenting every aspect, motivation, private chat, and twisted aim. Nothing evaded his record. They assumed silence equaled safety. They thought that the absence of evident repercussions indicated grace. However, in actuality, the delay provided God with the ideal perspective. A broader lens offers a more complete image. And when God operates, he does not only address the surface. He aims at the entire system. And that takes time. Not because he is slow, but because he is meticulous. The collapse was more than simply what they did to you. It was about what they believed they could get away with. The longer they stretched the deception, the greater the burden of truth got, until it finally fell on them with full force. There is no escape, no place for justifications, and no one left to defend them. Because the entrances had already been closed quietly, carefully, and permanently. Delay provided them the appearance of control. However, the more they stalled, the more heavenly angles closed in on them. And what began as a delay turned into a trap they created with their own hands. Every postponed apology, missed talk, and disregarded sign contributed to the evidence heaped against them. So when the judgment comes, it will not be unexpected. It will be the outcome of all they believed had been forgotten. Everything they thought slipped through, yet nothing happened. Because time cannot erase what God intended to reveal. In this scenario, their delay was not their excuse. That was their undoing. And now the repercussions will not be arbitrary. They'll be deserved. Number 10, they did not survive you. They received their own curse. They assumed that going away meant they had one because they did not face immediate punishment. They managed to outweed the repercussions. What they didn't comprehend was that spiritual law doesn't follow the same rules as human justice. Just because they did not collapse publicly does not imply that they escaped secretly. In reality, what they inherited was considerably worse than they could have anticipated. A curse that plagues whatever they attempt to make. They did not survive. They collected judgment in a different way. A quiet one, a sluggish one that does not knock you down right away, but instead drains all you strive to build up. That is the cost of contacting a selected person with dirty intentions. It's not always fire from above. Sometimes the rusting is invisible. Their relationships begin to fall apart. Their plans never really take off. Their minds grow crowded, and calm becomes unattainable. Regardless of how hard they work, something always crumbles beneath them. It's not bad luck. It is spiritual retribution, because touching someone who is protected by divine purpose curses your future. That is not superstition. That is a consequence. The most horrifying aspect is that they are unaware that the curse is in effect until they are well under it. By the time kids begin connecting the dots, the harm has already occurred. The rot has already started. This is not about vengeance. It's about the divine order. They crossed a spiritual line, and now whatever they strive to construct will be built on shaky ground. It doesn't matter how nice it appears on the surface. Behind the scenes, it will always fall apart, since their foundation was poisoned the moment they touched you in deception, pride, or cruelty. And this is the reality. The longer they dodge accountability, the more their curse grows. Not because you wanted it, not because you said anything, but because God saw everything. And God guards the innocent with unannounced justice. It just shows up in the results. So they may still be standing. However, what they currently wield does not represent triumph. It's deterioration. And wherever they go, it will follow them, not because of what they have lost, but because of who they attempted to destroy. On number 11, you are not their karma. You are their reflection. You were not sent to wreck them. That was never your role. You did not fight them, curse them, or even try to retaliate. You were merely being yourself, consistent, sincere, and resilient. And that is what pushed them over the brink, since it was not you who shattered them. It was a reflection of who they were when they stood next to someone like you. You did not reciprocate their energy. You mirrored it. And in that mirror, they saw themselves clearly for the first time, and they couldn't take it. They intended to depict you as the villain. They needed to make you appear like a threat. However, the more they promoted that story, the more it backfired. Because nothing in your actions ever matched the picture they attempted to project. You were a paradox. They couldn't be silent. The longer you remained solid, the more unstable they got. Not because you did anything, but because who you are continued to reveal who they are, rather than because your tranquility irritated them. Your expansion offended them. Your capacity to move ahead without resentment shattered them, because they couldn't understand how you stayed standing while they hurled everything at you. Deep down, it reminded them of everything. They are not honest, aligned, or selected. That is why your name troubles their spirits. It is not because you are haunting them. It is because they failed the exam you provided. You are not their karma. You are their mirror. And that is terrible, because karma strikes and departs. But mirrors remain. And every time they hear about you, they imagine you winning. Hear your name discussed. It represents the truth. They believed they had buried you. They became the proof. They were unable to erase the unexpected reminder. And now, no matter how far they travel, your presence remains with them. Not as punishment, but as proof. Proof of who they truly are. Proof of how low they had to go in order to break someone who was never fighting back. Proof that the damage they perceive was not inflicted by your hands, but by their own. You did not destroy them. They self-destructed, attempting to dim a light that was not even targeted at them. They are now left with only the fragments and their reflections. Number 12. God isn't petty. He's perfect. God does not function in the same manner that people do. He's not emotional, impulsive, or petty. He does not intend to humiliate someone out of anger. His activities aren't motivated by ego or pride. When God moves, things are never messy. It's precise. It's surgical. Every consequence, exposure, and collapse is measured not to entertain you, but to show the truth and restore equilibrium. That is why his justice is terrifying. It cannot be bribed, twisted, or avoided. People seek rapid karma. They seek dramatic vengeance. They want to see those who have wounded them suffer immediately. But this is not how God operates. He doesn't simply punish. He corrects, And he does so in such a way that it's clear who was correct, who was wrong, and why. It had to finish as it did. God doesn't overreact. He observes calmly as individuals show you and him who they truly are. And once the pattern is obvious, he moves. But not with fire or noise. He moves like a surgeon using a sword, cutting with precision, aiming for the root and revealing everything concealed behind layers of lies and pretense. And when the judgment arrives, it does two things simultaneously. It shatters the illusion for everyone watching and dismantles the person who thought they were invincible. That is why his justice differs from retribution. Revenge is an emotional response. It is reactive. It stems from anguish. But God's justice stems from order, sovereignty, and righteousness. He does not only eliminate the individual, he also removes the system that enabled the person. He doesn't just cease the falsehood. He eliminates every door, the untruth used to propagate. That is why some people lose more than just their position. They lose their voice, access, and favor. God is not concerned in just making a point. He wants to halt the cycle. So God isn't petty. He is perfect. As a result, the effects are just as expected, not only to please the present, but to establish truth with far-reaching consequences. His hand isn't loud. It's precise, and his movements leave no space for misunderstanding. Only clarity and fairness. Only the truth. Finally, standing alone. Number 13. You were the exception that disrupted their pattern. They followed a pattern, cycle, or formula that worked every time. Intimidate, manipulate, and dominate others, then walk on as if nothing occurred. They understood how to twist stories, play innocent, and change the narrative. It worked for everyone else. They were confident since they'd gotten away with it before. People dreaded them. People remained silent. People folded. But then they came upon you, and nothing went as planned. You did not break in the way they expected. You did not beg. You did not shrink. And you didn't perform the part that was allocated to you. They expected you to conform to the norm. But you aren't made like the rest. You were an exception. And that one exception destroyed their whole pattern. They were unsure how to deal with someone who did not respond to terror. Someone they couldn't manipulate. Someone who could stand firm without seeking vengeance. And this upset them since their entire approach was based on control. You didn't have to fight back to win. You were covered. You were preserved. More than that, you were activated. You were not just shelter from the damage. You were the disturbance that revealed it while others remained silent. You become a beacon where others were buried. You rose to become visible. You are not the only one who made it out. You were the one who caused everything that was hidden in the shadows to come to light. That's why when they touched you, everything fell apart. Not because you were loud, but because you disrupted their rhythm. You showed the flaw in their scheme just by living, simply by keeping upright. You did not play their game. That wrecked the game altogether. They were used to having the last word. You did not argue. But now your existence speaks louder than any speech ever could. You were not sent only to defeat them. You were dispatched to disrupt the mechanism behind them. You were the one who performed their customary stunts. Stop working. That is why they are still unable to get over you. Because you didn't just endure them. You undid everything that made them feel strong. You did not fit within their pattern. You've wrecked it. And now they're left wondering how one exception led to the end of their cycle. Number 14. They sought to steal your breath, but God will stop theirs. They sought to quiet you, deprive you of your voice, and crush your soul. So awful that you'd never get up again. They didn't want to just watch you suffer. They intended to steal your breath, life, and purpose away. That was the amount of darkness they carried. It was not petty jealousy. It was devastation disguised as compassion and charity. They forgot, however, that man does not own his breath. It's borrowed, and when God decides it's time, he may take it back immediately. This isn't a metaphor. This is reality. Their very breath used to lie on your name. They spoke with their breath. Curses behind closed doors. They used to curse your name with every breath. It's on loan from the Creator, and when heaven has stopped watching, when the scales are filled, when kindness has taken its course, God doesn't argue. He just revokes what they never owned. They assumed they were untouchable since nothing had occurred yet. However, delay is not an exception. Time alone cannot provide safety, and the longer they went without regret, the more it became clear that they had no fear of the repercussions. That is what triggers divine judgment, not the error, but the unrepentant spirit that caused it. You didn't need to wish them harm. God was already listening, so you didn't have to say anything. God preserved the breath they sought to steal from you. He extended your life while silently ticking down theirs. Not out of spite, but out of fairness. Because he will never let darkness overcome someone he has anointed. Ever. There's a point when God says enough. And when that time arrives, he doesn't have to send a sign. He simply eliminates the breath. And the removal is not harsh. It is final. A holy deed that reminds everyone present that no one can outrun God. Not with lies, not with charm, not with strength, and not with time. So, while they were trying to end you, they unintentionally started their own ending. And when it does happen, it will not be spectacular. It will be heavenly, silent, abrupt, and irrevocable. Because the same God who gave them life will take it away without warning, and no one can stop him. They believed they could write the conclusion to your narrative. They believed that their lies, sabotage, and silence would be the final chapter. However, they were never the author. God was. And when they touched you with filthy intentions, they did not just confront you. They challenged the person who sent you. This was their catastrophic error. You weren't just spared. You were placed not to slap back, but to serve as proof that divine justice exists. That purpose cannot be destroyed, and that survival in quiet frequently shouts louder than 1,000 cries. Every attempt to destroy you drove you further into harmony. And every delay, in their opinion, was God constructing the case piece by piece, detail by detail, until they had nowhere to hide. This was not simply about exposing people. This was about bringing down manipulative structures, patterns of silence, and abusive generational cycles. You were the interruption, the mirror, and the evidence. And now, whether they admit it or not, your presence challenges everything they have become. But now comes the decisive moment. You didn't need to destroy them. They ruined themselves in an attempt to kill what heaven had sealed. You didn't need to curse them. The curse was caused by touching you in the wrong way. In the end, it was not karma. It was a celestial judgment that was straight, surgical, and unmistakable. So move openly, not with pride, but with clarity. You were never insane. You were chilly. You were never feeble. You were weaponized. And while they plotted your destruction, God was already planning your comeback. Not simply for your own vindication, but also for their exposure. This is not simply your win. It is your proof that divine justice does not fail. No one, no matter how calculating, brilliant, or well-connected, can outrun God. If this message resonated to your soul, do not scroll past it. Create something with it, such as a video, so that others may discover it. Comment below to let your voice be heard. Someone else may be praying for confirmation, and your testimony might provide it. Share this with someone who needs to understand that divine justice is still very real and active. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the Bloom channel, not simply to show your support, but also to remain connected to material that goes deeper, talks louder, and beckons you higher. This is not simply a channel. This is a movement for truth, and you belong here.